Assalamu alaikum, this is Dr. Mona El-Idrisi, author of The Muslim Narcissist. In today's podcast, I will be answering a question that was asked by someone on this channel. The question was, why does God allow abusive people to have children? Why are innocent children born into these toxic households? And as I can imagine, this is a question that may be bothering a lot of people because they do wonder what the blame is or the fault is of these innocent children who now have to be raised in a toxic household with toxic parents. And so I will be diving into the subject to give you answers from that hadith, from the Quran, and from life itself, and from the experiences that I've been through and I've seen people go through. Inshallah, this will answer people's questions because I do feel that many people do doubt God's abilities and God's love for innocent people when He places them with toxic parents and toxic siblings and toxic partners. I've had many people come to me in counselling sessions where their faith in Allah has been shaken because they do wonder why God would have given them such a abusive husband or an abusive wife, and they themselves are practicing and praying people and so forth. So it's really important to gain some clarity on this subject to clear it up. So if we look back to the purpose of marriage, we have to take this back to marriage because that will be the core essence of, building a family and having children. So if we go back to seeing how the marital structure is in our societies, we will see that the problem actually lies there. So as I was saying in previous podcasts, when people choose to marry each other, they have different intentions towards each other. So good people may end up with people who are ill-intentioned. Ill-intentioned people may deceive others into thinking that, they want an Islamic marriage, for purity, for religious reasons and so on. And many people fall for this. Now, the increase in marriages with narcissistic people is what's creating all these toxic households and families. So essentially it all goes back to people not following the sunnah. It goes back to people not knowing that they have disorders, that they have many mental health issues that need solving, many mental health issues that need addressing. There are so many people out there who are in desperate need of therapy, desperate need of counselling and even psychotherapy, and they're not receiving this because either they don't know that they need the help, or they don't know where to get it, or they can't afford it. So for this reason, there are many people who are getting married to men and women who not only have mental health problems, but have serious disorders. And the worst among them would be the covert narcissists. And covert narcissists can end up becoming psychopaths if their abuse is tolerated and if they find the fuel to keep going. Because narcissism does transcend, it does increase, and it gets worse with time when the codependent partner that they're with is tolerating the abuse. So because of this problem that we have, and this is actually why I wrote the book, because I really need people to be really aware of the people around them, the people who they're considering for marriage, the people who they are falling in love with. When Muslims marry narcissists, you are already setting yourself up to have a toxic family home, to have a toxic marriage. And the children that will be born into that marriage will come as a result of the choice that you made. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, when he advised us, and he advised us from the heart to marry people who are God-fearing and people who are good. And yes, there are narcissists out there who pretend to be God-fearing and they pretend to be good, but there are many signs that come with that expose them. But many people are not aware of those signs. They're not aware of those red flags that pop up, that contradict someone's fear of Allah or someone's even love for Allah. They contradict those. So because people aren't aware of those traits, or they make the decision to ignore those traits, marrying a narcissistic person or someone who displays problematic traits from the beginning, someone who displays mental health problems from the beginning, you're already setting yourself up for a life with that person and to parent children with that person. Now, a lot of people blame Allah for this. They blame Allah for the children that come out of these marriages, when actually it's people who don't want to take responsibility for their choices. So if we're not choosing men and women to marry based on their abilities to be a good parent, to be able to provide a loving home, a loving environment, that they're religious and God-fearing enough to not oppress anyone in that household, then you're setting yourself up. You're setting yourself up for a very difficult, turbulent marriage. Just because that person is fun, that person keeps you on your toes, that person is beautiful, that person, you have a lot of chemistry with that person. But would they be a fantastic mother or father? Not really, or not at all. They care too much about having a luxury home and luxury holidays and for eating out in fancy restaurants. You can tell from the very beginning who will be a good parent to your child or not. Okay? Now, based on the choices that we make in life, we have to face the consequences of them. And Allah allows us to face the consequences of them. Because if we didn't face the consequences of our actions, our sins, our bad choices, then we wouldn't learn. We wouldn't learn. So if a man decides to marry a narcissistic woman, whether he knows it or not, he's ignored the red flags, he's not aware of, him manipulating her or, whatever it is that he's decided to put up with before marriage. If he hasn't seen that as a red flag, if he hasn't trusted his gut instinct that has been screaming at him that this woman is a problem, she's too dramatic, she's too erratic in her emotions, she's too all over the place, and he sugarcoats that with love and he sugarcoats that with infatuation, then be prepared to have children who will be born in an abusive family home. And it's us who have the part to play in that. It's not Allah who does that. If we look at the poverty in the world, you'll notice that so many poor people are having children. They have many children. Number one, it's their rizq. So children can be a blessing or a very difficult trial. Very difficult trial for their parents. Not all children are rizq. Like the rizq comes from a child. So when a child is considered to be a blessing or a rizq for their parents, it's because that child will grow up to be righteous. And a child that's righteous will pray for their parents and do good by their parents and do good by other people. And even after those parents die, that child will pray for them and do sadaqah for them, and he or she will be a sadaqah jariyah for that, for those parents. This is when children are rizq. Now, when children are a hardship, that's completely different. Children can be a trial for you, and it's in the Quran. That, from among your spouses and among your children and among, the money and the wealth that you have will be a trial for you, a difficult trial. And we know this from the stories of the prophets. We know this from Nuh alayhi salam when he had his son who rebelled against him. We know all of this. This is something that Allah teaches us to show us that children can either be blessings or they can be difficult trials. So the poverty situation that we see a lot of poor people in comes from oppression, comes from the oppression of governments, comes from the oppression of people not paying their zakah, comes from people not paying their sadaqah. So Muslims, well, not just Muslims, non-Muslims too, but if we're looking at the Muslim context, there are many, many millions of Muslims who are living in poverty and they're continuing to have children. Now, Allah has His hikmah for that. Allah, in His ultimate wisdom, gives poor people children, gives them children for different reasons. That's either their rizq or their trial. And if you notice, in poor countries, they tend to have more children than other people because this is their rizq. If they don't have money, then Allah's compensated them with good children. And if you notice as well, those children are there for their parents. They're there to help their parents find food. They're there to help their parents in old age. They formed a community. So even though that they're so poor, but they're happy. They're happy and they're content. And It's Allah's way of compensating them for the money that they don't have and the luxuries they don't have. Good, righteous children who go to the mosque and they're pious, Allah's given that to the poor. Now, when it comes to us, when it comes to people who aren't living in poverty and we have everything, alhamdulillah, but we choose to put ourselves in a situation where we marry someone who is clearly problematic from the beginning, or does things that make you uncomfortable, then we've put ourselves in that situation. We've put our future children in that situation. And the children that are born into that relationship will either turn out to be codependents or narcissists. Now, those children, you may still ask, okay, what's the fault of those children? There is no fault on those children. They're innocent, beautiful human beings who have no sin upon them until the age of puberty. No one is judged for their sins until they reach the age of puberty, because by then you would know right from wrong. Children under the age of puberty, they're exempt. They're exempt from the trials and the accounting on the Day of Judgment, because their parents are responsible for them. So the consequence that you will face as a parent when raising your child as a narcissist, so if you are a narcissist and you are raising your child in a non-Islamic way, in an abusive way, in a harsh way, then you will be accountable for that. And your child, even later on in life, will be exempt from the accounting, because you would have oppressed that child, you would have taken the rights away from that child, and Allah will compensate that child in the next life for the oppression that he or she has gone through. Now, there can be much good that can come out of this situation with children. So those children have their own path to take in life. Now, I've seen many people who have come to me as clients. They've been born into families and, where they have narcissistic fathers, for example, and they've turned out to be exceptional people. They've turned out to be beautiful people, because once they heal, once they get the therapy that they need, they do so much good in the world. They could even help their parents. And just because children are born into toxic family households doesn't mean that they will be scarred for life. Usually it's the codependents and the empaths, when they heal from their childhood traumas, they become exceptional, amazing people. They become supernova empaths. And usually that comes from a place of wanting to heal, wanting to get better. So if you look at the people around you who are empaths and codependents, who have been abused when they were young, whether it's sexually, whether it's physically, whether it's verbally, you will find that they have found Allah at some point in their lives when they heal. Now, narcissistic children who copy the traits of their fathers and copy the traits of their mothers and turn out to be narcissistic as well, this is their life journey to take. So Allah has put them in that environment, and this has been their journey to take. And Allah tells us that nothing will change until you realize that what you're doing is wrong. Nothing will change. So we have the ayah, for example, which says, "Verily Allah will not change the good condition of a people as long as they do not change the state of goodness themselves by committing sins and being ungrateful and disobedient to Allah." So if you are not changing the situation with your own hands, Allah will not change it, because He needs you to learn the lesson. He needs you to see that when you marry narcissistic people, you will create a breeding ground for narcissistic children, and it will have a domino effect on everyone else. It will have a domino effect on society, which is what's happened now. Allah is showing us that when you don't follow what I've told you, when you don't follow the advice of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when it comes to choosing marriage partners and deciding who to have children with, this is what happens. You have narcissistic children who will rebel against you. You will have narcissistic children who will create havoc in our societies. But on the other side of that, the codependent children that come out of those toxic marriages and the empaths, those are the children who become exceptional people once they heal. And you'll find that they will be more grateful for things in life than those who were raised not knowing what abuse is, not knowing what that darkness is. And I see that in my counselling sessions. I see that when I counsel people, that codependents and empaths have more gratitude towards people once they heal. And they know, they're more aware, they're more streetwise, they're more aware of narcissists, and they're smarter people, and they're, there are advantages to it. Any child that is born in any specific situation or a trialing situation, it's done. It's done with a purpose. Allah loves all children. Children who are unfortunately abused when they're younger, children who are put through that turmoil and through those hardships. At the end of the day, who's going to be accountable for that? It will be the abusers. And the children will get compensated by Allah for that. But we have to see the ugly side of abuse. We have to see, children go through that abuse, to understand that when we don't follow what Allah's told us to do, this is what happens. This is what children are put through. This is the oppression that children are going through. And because no one's standing up for it, like, it's just getting worse. People are still marrying narcissists. Mosques are still facilitating marriages between problematic people. For example, I heard one imam say that he wanted to get a couple married because they were in a haram relationship, and someone told him, but brother, he's a drug addict. He said, I don't care if he's a drug addict, it's better than them being in a haram relationship. And I thought, this is the problem that we have. This is the serious problem that we have. And even when it comes to divorce, sheikhs will do whatever they can to keep a couple together just so that they don't get divorced, even though it's a toxic relationship, even though it's very abusive and the children are getting abused. So we're in a very toxic environment where these things have to happen for us to see the severity of these, the consequences of these marriage decisions. It's like war. Look at the wars that are happening now in Muslim countries. And the poverty that's happening and the children who are dying in these countries. Is it because Allah doesn't love them? No. It's because Allah is showing us that this is what's happened because you have not stood against oppression. You have not fought for the rights of other Muslims. The ummah is completely broken, and when the ummah breaks, this is what happens. So Allah has to show us the severe cases of what will happen if we go against His word. The state of the ummah now is crippled. It's crippled. We don't like seeing these pictures and videos of the Yemenis children who are starving and the Ethiopian children who are dying of hunger and the bombs that are falling on Palestinian homes and Syrian homes. Why are we seeing this? Why are we seeing this? Is it because God is unjust? No. Allah is just in everything. But this is the consequences of our actions or lack of actions. And it has to happen. It has to happen. It's the bitter truth. So children who go through this abuse have to go through it as a sign of Allah. They are a sign of Allah because it's Allah's way of showing us that this is why I've told you to do what I've asked you to do. This is why I've told you to listen to the Prophet Muhammad SAW when it comes to choosing a marriage partner, because if you don't, this is what's going to happen to your children with your abusive partner. They're going to get ruined. Allah says in the Quran, O believers, stand firm for justice as witnesses for Allah, even if it is against yourselves, your parents or close relatives. Be they rich or poor, Allah is best to ensure their interests. So do not let your desires cause you to deviate from justice. So if you see children being abused, if you see your sister about to marry someone who you really don't like and he looks like an abuser and he looks like a playboy, stop that from happening. Stop that from happening. If you see your brother about to marry a woman who is problematic and narcissistic, be there for him. Help him. Stop him from marrying that woman. If you see children being abused and hit, stand up for those children. This is injustice. This is injustice. We have to put people straight. But people say no, people will hear a woman being badly beaten in the same apartment block that they live in, and they'll say, I don't want to get involved. People will hear Muslim children being beaten up and they're only 4 or 5 years old, and you can hear them screaming because their narcissistic father is beating them up. And people say, I don't want to get involved. Muslims have to hold each other accountable, because if you don't hold each other accountable, narcissists will abuse children. Narcissists will go out of their way to do this. This is a result, all this abuse of children that we see now is a result of us, our actions. It's us. We are choosing to have children with problematic people. We are not choosing to divorce somebody before we have a child with them, because we have our own issues that have not been solved. We have to go to therapy. We have to go to counselling to identify the issues that we have, so that we don't get caught up in these situations and that children don't have to get dragged into them. Beautiful, innocent children don't get dragged into them. And at the end of the day, all these people who are abusers and who are not giving their children their due rights, there's heavy punishment for this, because this is oppression. This is oppression. And they don't understand. So when Allah gives abusive people children, then it's just to add fuel to the punishments that they're already lined up to have. It's just like an addition that you're going to. It's an addition to their punishment. Because they don't know how to raise those children. They don't know what to do with them. They just know how to control them as puppets and use them as puppets and use them as tools for their own social gain and personal gains and everything. So the oppression that comes out of that will backfire on them. It will backfire. And unfortunately, it's the codependent or empathic parent who has to suffer and watch their children get abused. Why would you put yourself through that? The book that I wrote has been written so that you can understand narcissists and you can identify them, so that you do not marry them. And I can't stress this enough. If you're married to a narcissist now and you don't have children, try your best to get out of that situation, because if you don't, then you are essentially creating an environment for another child to be abused. And you're going to have to go through that horrible lesson. And the more people tolerate this and choose to have children with narcissists, the more Allah will have. Allah's put in a position now where He has to show us the consequences of these actions. He has to show us. He has to show us how our children will be broken in that situation. Because if Allah did not show us that children will be broken in such a situation, then we would all marry problematic people. None of us would have the marriage that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wanted us to. We wouldn't have the marriage that would take us to Jannah. We would have a marriage full of stress and anger and anxiety and mental health problems and suicidal thoughts. And that's not a way to live, and it's not an environment. It's not a way to raise your children. So it has nothing to do with God. It has nothing to do with God not being merciful. And it has nothing to do with God not loving children or oppressing children by putting them in that situation. If Allah has decreed for someone abusive to have a child, there is hikmah in that. There is hikmah in that for the person, for the abuser, and there's hikmah in that for the child. It's a part of the child's journey. It's been decreed, it's been written for this child to have this start in life. Because one day that child might turn out to be an exceptional person because of the traumas that he or she went through. Once they heal and move on, and you don't know. No one knows. No one knows the hikmah behind all these things. But when it's someone innocent, when it's someone beautiful and, a child, then it's always khair. It's always khair. But the abuser who has been granted a child, usually more often than not, it's either this child will change the parent and make the parent a good parent. And this is not impossible, by the way. There are many stories in which, even from Islamic history, where narcissistic men in particular, changed completely when they had a child. They changed. Something entered their heart for that child. Not every narcissistic parent is abusive to their children. Some of them, they really do love their children. But they use them to abuse the parent. So they will use the children to make their wives jealous, for example. But there is genuine care and genuine, love for small children amongst some narcissists, but they don't show it. For example, look up the story of Malik bin Dinar. Malik bin Dinar and what happened with him and his daughter. He was an alcoholic, and he changed when he had a daughter. So do Google that story. It's quite a long story. It will take me time to read it here, but just Google Malik bin Dinar, the story of him and his daughter, and you will see that how Allah sometimes will bless an abuser with a child to change him or her. That it does happen, and if it doesn't change him, or if that child does not, put the empathy back in that narcissist's heart, or puts that compassion, then the child will be a trial. The child will become a trial for him or her in the hereafter, because of the oppression and the abuse. So Allah has His hikmah for everything. Allah has His hikmah. And like I said, some children need this start in life, need a difficult start in life, so that they can grow up to be exceptional people. And if you look at so many motivational talks, if you listen to them on YouTube, you will find that some of the greatest men had very problematic childhoods, and they were abused and all sorts. But subhanAllah, Allah rewarded them and compensated them for that abuse in their childhood by allowing them to become very successful, high achievers, and just brilliant people. You will always find, I love to listen to YouTube motivational lectures all the time, and I always find this common pattern of the best men and women too, but men in particular, who came from very problematic and dysfunctional families and households. But unfortunately, they had to go through that ugly childhood, and they lost out on a childhood before they were compensated by Allah. But that's our problem. That's the problem is in our hands for that to happen. So there's hikmah in everything. That's the whole point of this podcast. At the end of the day, we have to maintain justice. Like Allah says, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. So the translation of this is, corruption has appeared throughout the land and sea by what the hands of people have earned. And then he says, ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون. So that Allah can let them taste some of the consequences of what they have done, that perhaps they will return to righteousness. And this is in Surah Ar-Rum, verse 41. So again, I'll repeat that. Corruption has appeared throughout the land and the sea by what the hands of people have earned, what they've done, so that Allah may let them taste part of the consequences of what they have done. Perhaps they will return to righteousness. So Allah wants us to see the consequences of our bad actions and the bad actions of other people. So we have to learn from the bad decisions of other people. Learn from the bad decisions of your friends who married narcissistic women and men. Learn from the bad choices of your parents and your mothers and your fathers and your siblings and your neighbours. Learn from them so that we don't repeat the same mistakes. Because when we do make those mistakes, you have to be sure that Allah will show you the consequence of that mistake. And unfortunately, it will be you who will have to see your children suffer. It will be you. And it will be other people who have to endure the pain of seeing children, being hit when they're young for stupid things because the father's narcissistic and he has anger problems, or the mother is narcissistic and she doesn't know how to care for her children. So don't put yourselves in that situation, and stand up against justice. When you see that happening to small children, stand up for them. Stand up for them. Don't allow them to be abused. Don't allow your nieces and nephews to be abused. Don't let it be okay that they're always slapped and verbally abused and shouted at. They're small, innocent beings. So I hope that has clarified the situation and answered that question. If it hasn't, please leave comments in the box below. But I just wanted this to be I just wanted this to be answered this way, because I really need people to understand that when you're with a narcissist, they really can affect your iman. They really can affect the future of your children and the future that you're going to have for yourself. So this is why a lot of people, they suffer in their iman and they resent Allah. They resent Allah and they resent the Prophet, because they think that, why would Allah put me in that situation when you've put yourself in that situation? It's you. Allah sent you many warning signs to stop you marrying that person. He gave you a gut instinct that you're not using, that you're not listening to. He gave you a bad feeling when you around that person. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has already advised you of the qualities to look in men and women, and we ignore that. We don't follow the sunnah. And so Allah's like, okay, I'm going to have to let them make that decision, because they're ignoring all the signs that I'm sending them, all the red flags that I'm showing them. They want to ignore them. Fine, okay. See the consequence of marrying this person. Go ahead. So this is what has to happen. This is how Allah teaches us. And we have to go through a very harsh lesson sometimes. Very harsh lesson to learn that lesson. It happened to me. It's happened to many people that I've come across in life. I did ignore red flags before, and I did marry someone who was problematic. But I made the choice to get out of that relationship before I had any children, because I thought, this is enough. I'm not going to make my future children go through this either. I'm not going to make them go through any kind of abuse with such a person. So I made that active decision to leave, because it was enough that it was just me and my family getting affected. I didn't want children to get affected too. So, but I had to learn the hard way that this is what happens when you ignore red flags. This is what happens when you ignore problematic behaviour. You have to live it now. You have to live it, because I always made excuses. I thought, no one's perfect. No one's going to be exactly what I want. It's okay. I can deal with this, and I can deal with that problem, and I can deal with this problem. It was those little problems that I ignored and brushed under the carpet that really came to slap me in the face later. So don't ignore red flags. Don't ignore problematic behaviour. You really don't want to raise your children. Don't give your children that start in life. Give your children a loving home to be raised in. Marry the religious people. Marry good people. Yes, they may not be as glamorous, but marry those people, because your children are going to be really happy in those homes. And that is how we fix this problem. That is how we will see a decline in children who are getting abused. It's that simple. Marry the right people. Encourage others to marry the right people. Encourage your friends and your siblings to marry the right people and to avoid the wrong people. And you will see a decline in children who are abused. And that's all it is. So I hope I've answered that question. I've got other questions as well that people have asked me. I've got podcasts, inshallah, lined up about how to deal with narcissistic parents from an Islamic perspective, how to give them their rights and obey them and everything while they're being so abusive and so difficult. That's a question that often comes up. So I will do a podcast about that. I've got a podcast coming up about siblings, narcissistic siblings, and how to deal with them. I've got a podcast coming up, inshallah, about interfaith marriage and loads of other things. So do keep an eye out on the podcast that will be released soon, inshallah. And until the next one, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.